All right, today we're going to get these rusted rocket panels out of here and replace them with this new sheet metal. And we're going to make it look like this. Welcome back to Random Rod Shop, folks. We're going to get back on this 67 short wide bed we started on a little while ago. The original plan was I was going to put these cab braces in here and then flip this thing back over and put it on the truck so I could fix the rocker panels. These things are nasty, and so I've decided I'm going to put the inner rocker panels on when it's up like this, so I can basically get all of the underneath side structurally sound before I set this thing on the cab. Then I don't want to put the outside rocker panels on until I get the doors put on this thing and I get it mounted on the cab so I can get that gap at the bottom of the rocker panel. So as usual, I got the, like I said at the start of this project, I'm going to go ahead and buy replacement panels for the 67. The 57, I'm going to try to make everything, but for the 67, we're going to buy all the panels, and you've seen that at this point. Replacement panels. All right, so here is for the passenger side. At the top, the lip is about, 3 3/4. And at the bottom, the overlap down here is about 4 1/2. So for the passenger side, the floorboard, which is what this piece is the patch for the floorboard. It goes from 3 3/4 down to 4 1/2. On the driver's side, it seems to do kind of the other thing. It's about 4, give or take, 4 1/8, and then down at the bottom, it's like 3 1/2. So what I did, or what I've decided to do, I guess, I got me a little dangle divider here, and I set that at about 3 1/4 inches. And I just scribed it all the way down, then I took my Sharpie and put a line on there. So it's going to be, about 1/4 inch. I'm going to have to cut about 1/4 inch more on the floorboard up here. Down there, I have to cut a lot more out of it, but I figured the first pass is I got to get all this rusty metal out of the way. And so that's what I'm going to proceed to do at this point. One more thing. So I was worried about, one of the reasons I wanted this cab on the frame was I just want to protect this distance, the door opening distance. And even though I've got it mounted to the door latch there, and I got it mounted to the door hinges up here, I really, just make me feel better, I went ahead and welded a plate from the stand to this outside cab corner. Did that on both sides. My thought is, that's probably best I can do in terms of keeping the dimensions of where they were at. And that's assuming they were right. But at this point, I don't have anything else to go on, so that's what I'm going to do. Near as I can tell, I got the cab solid. I'm not going to move the thing, so I'm not going to jostle it around. So right now, I need to get after cutting basically the inner and outer rocker panel off of this thing. I'm not going to make you watch that. I'm going to be here probably at least 2 or 3 hours trying to get this all whittled up and get it all cleaned up. Because I'm going to have to replace it from here all the way down to the bottom on both sides. I have to make a little patch up here because this patch panel doesn't actually cover everything that's rusted up here. So we'll have to cut in a patch up there. But my focus at this point is to get these patch panels on and get this thing solid again. So I'm going to shut you off, and I'm going to get after it with a sawzall and a grinder and whatever it takes to cut all of this mess out and get it all cleaned up. Hopefully, since I got the cab mounts positioned, these bolts will serve as And that's assuming they're right. So once I should say that, once I get the outer rocker cut off, I'm gonna go ahead and measure these holes that they've got in this replacement panel, make sure they're, as near as I can tell, in the same place. Assuming that, then I'll cut the inner rocker panel off. All right, if I run into any troubles, I'll bring you back, but at this point, I'll bring you back when we're cleaning things up and trying to get things put back together. All right, I'll get back to you. I thought I'd bring you back for a minute. Let me get the camera. All right, so once I got this floorboard off and this inner rocker, this is rusted out. And I can tell you from experience, fixing that with a floor pan in is a royal pain. So we'll cut that out and see if I can get that welded in there like so. I still got a little bit of shaping to do, but I'll cut that out with the little cutoff wheel and spend some time fitting this and seeing if I can get that welded in there. Well, as usual, it takes longer than you think it's going to take. But I think I got it all out of there. Turns out, needed to fix rust here. I showed you the rust here, but it also on the outside of this this A-pillar. Had to fix that. All right, so now I think we're about ready to see if we can fit that replacement panel. Let me show you something. Okay, so here's the panel that we're going to put in. All right, this is the inside rocker. This is the rear cab repair panel, right? Because this is rusted out right here in that cab over there. So the question is, you know, they cover the same spot. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the inner rocker in so it's all one piece, and I can go ahead and bolt it to the A and B pillar to try to get the cab together. And then when the time comes to put the rest of this in, I'm going to, I think if I remember right, I'm going to have to cut it up here, and then we'll cut it here, and then we'll put this panel in the cab. Remember, I'm going to have the back cab corner also. I'll have access to the very back. Let me take you back over there. So that rear cab patch panel, it actually spot welds to this rear cab corner. And this does the same thing. Right. That piece right there actually goes down under there. So the decision I've run into is to get this piece in, right, it needs to slide down. So given I'm going to have the rear cab corner off, I'm going to cut this inner rocker off right there so that I can work this down and get this all fitted in there. Then when I get the cab turned back over and I cut that rear cab corner off, I can weld this back on and go ahead and weld the rest of the rear cab floor patch panel in using that piece over there. That's my thought anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and get this cut off, and then we're going to see if we can slide this thing down in there. Wish me luck. that took a little more finagling than I thought it was going to. Had to remove the rest of the lower cab, or had to move the rest of the lower outer rocker, and basically put the big channel locks on that and kind of tweak that out, give enough room for that lip to go down there. Something to keep in mind on the next one. All right, let me see if I can get the rest of this thing in here. It's kind of interesting. This entire floorboard is loose, so all the spot welds were busted here, and they're busted up the side there. You would have thought, you know, being an old farm truck, farmer would have put some sheet metal screws in there or something, but not in this case. Let's see here. Let me get an alignment bar and see if I can jiggle this thing around. And we'll see if we can get this thing clamped together. And I'll put some bolts in it. And see what we can do. Just in case you're wondering, I got to put this cab sport back in before I actually bolt these in, but what I'm thinking is I'm going to get this all cut and get it welded and fit before I put that cab sport in. But I want to put these bolts in so that it will line everything up. All right, well, I think I can get that bottom bolt in. As you might expect, there's a lot of jiggling and moving, but I think it looks pretty good. I should be able to, once I get that cab corner out of there, I should be able to, you know, weld the brace on and fix the floor pan here. I think now I just need to see if I can get some bolts in it. I didn't want to drill any holes in this until I had it, you know, kind of positioned. There's one hole in it. It's got, this one right here. This actually has a hole in it, and it was pretty close when I measured it off of the old one. It was pretty close, so I'm going to go with it. Now I need to drill a hole and get the bolt in there and drill a hole there and see if I can get this thing all tightened up. Then I'll come back in here and I'll just do a cutting butt for the most part and see if I can get this thing all put together. All right, let me see if I can wiggle a bolt in there and get that tight. Then I'll drill another hole. The way I do that is these bolts they're not really self-tapping, but they've got a tapered end on them. So I'm gonna try to get a centered 1/8 inch hole through there. Then I'll open it up as much as I can without messing the threads up. Oh, that reminds me. It would appear that this is going to have to be replaced because it's pretty rusty and crusty. It's kind of weak. So once I get everything in there and get it all positioned, and, you know, so everything's lined up, I'm gonna have to make another one of these because this ain't gonna work. It's too crusty. Okay, let's get this in first. Okay, well, I think it's all in there. I'm gonna cut this on the inside because there's still some rust in this old metal, so I'm going to cut it from the inside and tack it as I go. I've still got to put a bolt in the bottom. This is solid. I've got one bolt down there. It would appear that the lower cab mount, or the rear cab mount, the holes in the rear cab mount don't line up with this 67. The 67 B-pillar. You know, the weld-in nuts. So we'll have to drill a completely new hole there. All right, I'm gonna get after this. This ain't very exciting. Let me get back with you when I when I get this thing cut. Okay. Well, it's all welded in. Still got to grind it up. I ground this down flat and got this upper cab mount put back in. Now there's a lot of welding. So got to go back through and plug weld. You can see I've got screws in here. I got to plug weld all of this stuff. Now, I do plug welds, I don't know, I think a little different than I've seen a lot of guys do. So you notice I've got a lot of screws in here. Got quite a few screws up along the top and along the bottom. The way I like to plug weld is I'll take that screw out and I'll drill a 1/4 inch hole in it, 5/16, 1/4 inch, whatever bit I happen to have. And then I'll put a backer on it, whether it's this or a piece of copper. I'll hold a backer on the back side of this thing and then I'll plug weld that whole thing up. That way I know, I feel pretty confident it's going to get everything welded together, and with the screws on both sides, it keeps, to the best of my ability, it keeps the panels squished together. So just work my way along, you know, same thing over here. Now on these, I don't know if you remember, but let me pull one of these screws out. So on these, I drilled 1/4 inch holes. Right, so on the ones that's blind, I'll just come back up in here and I will weld all of that mess. And then pull another screw out and weld it. So take one screw out at a time and plug weld the hole up. That seems to be, for me, that seems to be the best way I have found to make sure everything gets welded together and stays mashed together. So what did I learn on this? Well, the rocker was pretty close. This edge up here wasn't bit quite right, but it's not going to be a big deal. I thought I was just going to be able to slide this thing in, but there's a lip in this B-pillar right here that kind of fights you because there's a hump. Right. There's a hump in this rocker. All right, so when you try to slide this down, this hump gets in the way. And so what I ended up doing, I literally had to roll this B-pillar back enough to get that thing slid in there. So that wasn't as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. But in the end, it fit pretty well. In terms of matching up the bends, they actually were pretty close. I didn't have to fight too much to get this cove here to line up or to get this bead to line up. They weren't perfect, but they weren't that far off. So all in all, I think that inner rocker fit pretty well. Drilling the holes and getting everything lined up is always a test in patience, but other than that, I think it worked out all right. Just to kind of refresh, you know, I ended up having to cut that patch out because this didn't cover enough of it. The inside, remember I had to make a patch for the inside of the A-pillar, and as it turns out, I had to cut that out. And looking down here, when I really get this cab turned back over and start working, this is pretty crusty right here. I'm gonna have to cut this out. I don't know how much of that I'm gonna have to cut out. It may turn out that I order a new B-pillar, a lower B-pillar patch, depending on how much rust, because this thing's a little crustier than I would like. But I think I think that replacement I can do once I get this cab turned over, because I'm going to have full access to the back. Remember, I'm going to cut this cab corner off, and so we'll have plenty of access to finish up the back side of that, which is why I'm really not going to focus on welding this lower cab brace in. Right. Had to cut it out all the way back to there, so I'm going to have to use that rear cab patch that showed you earlier to patch in all of this here. So, but all of this is pretty easy. I've done this on the truck, and it's not too bad. This front cab mount and this A-pillar is a whole different story on the truck. So I really wanted to get this done with the cab turned up like this. If we go to the other side, man, I am looking at this hard. It doesn't look like this side is near as bad, but you know, I've said that before. Definitely down here, this is going to have to be cut out, but the inner rocker isn't rusted out. I'll still replace it, but it's not rusted out. The question is, how much rust am I going to get into on this A-pillar? Don't know. It would be nice on this side to cut this inner rocker, you know, somewhere down here, because this cab mount, you know, I pieced it in. It doesn't come out, so putting this top cab mount in, it may actually have to, if I got to put the rocker in full length, it may not actually go in as one piece. I may end up having to cut that inner rocker in half so I can get all the pieces fit together. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this welded up. This is going to take me a bit. It always does. I'm going to try to finish up all the welding on this, at least, you know, from down here up. I'd like to finish all the welding and get it ground down. Then we'll start on that side over there. I'll cut the outer rocker off and see what we got. Well, as usual, I'll come back to you probably in a couple hours after I've got this all welded together. Well, that was fun. The bottom of this one was rusted out quite a bit more than the other side. Hopefully the top's not so bad though. All right. Let me see if I can make heads or tails out of what's going on in this A-pillar. Let me go get some things to poke at it with. All right. I got that side welded up, and let me show you that. Or I should say, yeah. All right, so I got it all plug welded. The firewall is now connected to the floorboard. I'm gonna wait to weld this together because I'm gonna have to get into those cowl vents. But it is now all solid. I also got this side apart. I think I showed you me taking a Sawzall and getting the bulk of it out. The lower B pillar is rusted out around this corner, and the bottom edge is off. This leg is supposed to come all the way down to here. So the bottom of that thing's kind of in tough shape. Up here we got a little different thing going on. So had a hole here, and this is the main A pillar. So I cut that out, basically so I could see what's going on inside there. And it's rusted out through there. It still feels solid, but it feels like I need to fix that, because that is part of the side panel, the kick panel. Right, the kick panel comes in and then bends over, and I can see some rust in there, but I can't really see how bad it is, and it pinches on this floorboard. So, I'm studying this pretty hard. And what I'm thinking right now is I'm going to cut out this patch panel, or this cab mount that I put in there, so I can get that out of the way, so I can go ahead and put the full length rocker in, and that will allow me really good access to fix anything that's going on with that inside kick panel. Not my favorite choice, but feels like I really need to get in there and see what's going on. I thought this corner was in good shape. Why did I think that? Okay, well, I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut here. That way I have at least, I've got the cut line and I've got a couple of screws. Probably gonna lose that one because the patch panel is gonna go in past that, but the bottom one, I may not lose that bottom one, so I may end up with 3 screws and the cut line to get everything lined back up. Well, let me get it done. Okay. Let's see if it was all worth it. Well, obviously the inner rocker, but I need to get that inner rocker out of there so we can have a look at this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting up the line I drew and see if I can get that inner rocker out of there. Okay, well, I got this all cut out of here. This edge should come around from right there all the way to here. So this is all rotted away, and this edge should curve around. That's what I showed you on the other side. That little dip right there is what created the problem trying to get that rocker panel in there. So I'm kind of stuck between principle and getting the job done. I know I said that I was going to buy all the patch panels for this, but it's going to take a while to get that B-pillar in here. And I'd really like to get this other rocker bolted down so I could turn this cab over. Okay, well, I'll just have to apologize for that, and let's go make that corner B-pillar there so we can continue on with this mess. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this section from here over to here. So we'll do the flat spot first. All right, let's take it over the bench and let's see what we can do with that. All right, I got the patch, or the pattern here. I think we're going to make this like Fitzy does in multiple pieces. There's a lot of bending and shrinking, and I just think it'd be easier just to weld the pieces together than try to fold it over and get those corners shrunk. If you missed the video on what it took to get this Harbor Freight throatless shear going, I'll see if I remember to put a link in the description. We had like a couple of videos to get this thing going. Well, now the trick is to see if this thing fits. What do you think? Looks like I need to go ahead and get that divot right there. Yeah, I got it a little short right there, so I have to remember that when weld on that flange. But I think that will actually work. All right, I'm gonna go do the same thing and get a pattern of the curve around the top and the curve around the bottom. Those should be just you know, rectangular bars or rectangular plates. So I'll be right back. Okay, well, I think that's gonna work. You guys that, if you haven't watched Fitzy, he has an interesting approach to this. Basically make the panel all in pieces and weld it on both sides, but weld it lightly on the side that's gonna be, basically weld it lightly on the side that's gonna be seen and do a heavier weld on the side that's not gonna be a seen. That way you can actually grind the corners off and make it look like a folded piece of metal. Kind of like that, right? And in this case, none of it's going to be seen, so I wasn't overly concerned with that. But if you're making panels, this is the way to do it. All right, let's move back over. Okay, well, given that this corner, this little hoopy-doo is what caused me so much trouble, I think the approach is, looks like I cut into it with the grinder up here. I'm going to weld those. I'm going to weld this hole that we found to start with and rust convert all of this stuff. It's going to take a while for the rust converter to cure, so I'm going to go ahead and put the rust converter on it, weld up the holes, put the rust converter on it, and we're just going to have to wait. So I'll get back to you. Okay, well, I got the rust converter on it and it's painted on the inside. This was significantly easier to put in with that lower cab actually cut out. You can see I've got it set in there right now. I got it painted and set in there, but that doesn't fit too bad. Now I'm going to go through here and I'm going to screw the old metal to the new metal and then take a cut. I think I've got it positioned where it's going to go. So I'm going to get this screwed together. Once I get this cut through here, I'm going to put the cab mount back on and get that thing bolted back up and get it welded back up. Hoorah! All right, I'm going to get some drill and get some screws, and I'm going to get this thing screwed together and then start slowly grinding and cutting this thing down. Well, that took a lot of time. All right, so both rockers are in. Let me show you how the cab corner came out. I think that worked out all right. And that sure made it a lot easier to get this rocker panel in. I've still got rust up here, so I'm gonna have to cut this out, fix that. And I still gotta drill the holes, put the bolts, top and bottom. Get this thing all bolted together, but I think that makes me happy. The rockers are in, or the inner rockers are in. A little bit more work, and I can finally flip this thing over so we can get it back on the frame and finish up the back of the cab floor and finish up the cab corners. And we still got the cowl vents, but basically I think we're really close to flipping this thing over and setting it back up on the truck. Probably another day of welding. I'd like to think it's not very much time, but you guys know better than that. Yesterday, my youngest son came out and we pulled the motor out of his 3/4 ton, the one he's been working on. It was a 350 with a turbo 400 in it. We just set the motor in tranny and it was running good. Set the motor in tranny and that's 63. So the 63 is actually the closest thing around here in terms of projects to running. So I'm kind of excited about that. Got to get some motor mounts and tranny mount, but basically the motor will be bolted in. And we put the front and rear, you know, the front suspension and the rear end out of my dad's 80. So it's in pretty good shape. It steers. Hopefully some point it's going to move. But we're going to stay on the 67, and so we can get to that 57. I thought 2025 was going to be the year of the 7s. It looks like 2026 is going to be the year of the 7s too. Hopefully we'll make a little more progress this year. If you haven't subscribed, you know, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, I'm Random at RandomRodShop, and I'm out of here.